Cultural materialism theory is one of the fundamental components in literature studies and is highly associated with Marxist theory. This theory falls under the category of recent trends theory. Cultural materialism was developed as a politically more radical form of new historicism. If we look at the word cultural and materialism separately in the context of its own, one could not really define the meaning to be one fixed meaning. Notable scholars and key thinkers such as Chris Barker, John Brannigan, Raymond Williams, and Majai Mikula mention that the word culture is one of the two or three most complicated words in English language, which can be understood as high culture and reserved exclusively for the social elites. Its principles can be differ in different contexts, but is always highly related with human beings to engage with society and its institution. The term first appeared in anthropological studies by Marvin Harris. Harris claimed that the theory was to reassert the methodological priority of the search for the laws of history in the science of man, specifically to prove that the analog of the Darwinian strategy in the realm of socio-cultural phenomena is the principle of techno-environmental and techno-economic determinism. This shows that similar technologies applied to similar environments tend to produce similar arrangements for the production and distribution of goods, which in turn tend to support similar sorts of social groupings who organize and explain their activities in terms of similar systems of beliefs and values. In this fashion, the principle assigns research priority to the study of the material conditions of socio-cultural life. In much the same way, according to Harris, as the principle of natural selection accords priority to the study of differential reproductive success. He claims that this makes the former a statement of a basic research strategy rather than a specific law of society. Critics have observed that despite Harris' attempts to avoid historicism and to exclude any reference to the Hegelian dialectic, his materialist approach to the study of culture shares the same characteristics as the materialism of Marx and Engels, namely, that as a concrete research strategy, it soon falls foul of empirical findings that falsify its basic premise, and as a sidle law of history, it must be framed at such an abstract level that it claims everything but says nothing. In short, this theory is a scientific method of studying the interaction between social life and material conditions, which is much influenced by both Marxist thought and Darwinian evolutionary theory. Like classical Marxism, it sees material conditions as the primary influence on social life. However, cultural materialism gives more attention to societal influences on economic production than to identifying class exploitation within a capitalist system. From the book Encyclopedia of Contemporary Literary Theory, Approaches, Scholars, Terms by Irene Rima McCaig, explains cultural materialism as a cultural phenomenon in terms of their place and their history in the material circumstances of specific people and in the productivity and reproductive demands of their environment. The theory was initiated in Britain in the late 1970s by the theoretical writings of Raymond Williams. Cultural materialism is a study that makes analysis based in critical theory in the tradition of the Frankfurt School. It describes a theoretical blending of leftist culturalism and Marxist analysis. The term then was borrowed and redefined by Jonathan Dollimore and Alan Sinfield in 1985 in a study of Renaissance drama, a subtitle to the essay of political Shakespeare. In the concept of ideology, based from the classical Marxism, cultural materialism is a system of false beliefs founded on contradictions and inconsistencies that misrepresent social relationships. On the other hand, from the modified Marxism of theories by Louis Althusser, looks at this theory in all institutions, including education system, law, religion, arts, as ideological state apparatuses, or known as ISA, which represent and reproduce the myths or beliefs that needed to maintain a society existing mode of economic production. Raymond Williams incorporates both the original and modified Marxist views by placing ideology in a context of change comprising residual, dominant, and emergent elements in culture. The dominant elements from the controlling ideology is a residual aspect of previous ideologies, maintains some influence, and emergent elements in the form of new ideas and new values initiate change by challenging central beliefs. The dominant values misrepresent by failing to acknowledge the complexity of social interaction. Therefore, marginal beliefs complete the ideological picture by accounting for this historical change and cultural contradiction. In the concept of ideology, this theory encompasses all social practices, including the production of literary texts, which both evaluate and participate in contemporary values and beliefs. Raymond Williams describes cultural materialism as a theory of the specificities of material cultural and literary production within historical materialism. Cultural materialism was always, for Raymond Williams, a Marxist theory. It is an elaboration of historical materialism. British critic Graham Holderness described this theory as a politicized form of historiography. It is a study of historical material within a politicized framework, including the present which those literary texts have in some way helped to shape. John Brannigan, in his book New Historicism and Cultural Materialism, stated that cultural materialism intended to explore literary texts within the context of contemporary power relations. Meanwhile, Eagleton has defined the cultural materialism conceived by Williams as a form of analysis which examined culture less as a set of isolated artistic monuments than as a material formation, complete with its own identifiable audiences, historically conditioned thought forms. It forms a kind of bridge between Marxism and postmodernism and, like New Historicism, takes on board a wide range of topics including feminism, sexual orientation, ethnic and post-colonial issues. This theory intended to explore literary texts within the context of contemporary power relations. It takes the implications of new histories' work further in historicizing its own practices within power relations. Also, it analyzed the process by which hegemonic forces in society appreciate canonical and historically important texts such as Shakespeare and Austen and utilize them in an attempt to validate or inscribe certain values on the cultural imaginary. Cultural materialist approaches to literature emphasize the social and economic context, publishing, theater, education, in which it is produced and consumed. Its insistence on the importance of an engagement with issues of gender, sexuality, race, and class, cultural materialism has had a significant impact on the field of literary studies. The theoretical device of cultural materialism study was introduced by Jonathan Dollimore and Alan Sinfield, the authors of Political Shakespeare book. Jonathan Dollimore and Alan Sinfield focus of interest in this theory at the ways in which literature from the past has functioned and been perceived in later periods. Sinfield has also explored his notion of faultiness in literature or the contradictions in the ideologies discoverable in texts. The device designating a critical method with 4 characteristics, which are: first, historical context; second, theoretical method; third, political commitment; and fourth, textual analysis. Cultural materialists seek to draw attention to the processes being employed by contemporary power structures, such as the church, the state, or the academy, to disseminate ideology. They explore a text's historical context and its political implications, and then through close textual analysis note the dominant hegemonic position and identify possibilities for the rejection and/or subversion of that position.